Coming up in a special episode, I'm going to track my personal dealings with Trump and our family's dealings with Trump to reveal a personal side of the man that is rarely depicted in the media, oddly enough, rarely shown by Trump himself. I want to argue that Trump is a figure of vastly superior character to those who routinely criticize him on this account. We don't need to remake Trump. This is one of my conclusions. We need to remake our understanding of Trump. Hey, if you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
The film Vindicating Trump is still in theaters. Not as many theaters as it was last weekend, but it's still in theaters. If you haven't seen it before and you want to see it in the theater, you still can. Go to vindicatingtrump.com. And coming out shortly is the book, Vindicating Trump. The pub date is the official publication date, October 8th, but you can pre-order the book now, and you can just go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble and do that, or you can go to the movie website, vindicatingtrump.com, scroll down, there's a tab. You can pre-order the book, and books will be shipped out very shortly. You'll be getting it right around the publication day. In fact, you'll be one of the first people to see it. And what I'm going to do in this special edition of the podcast is I'm going to give you an introduction to the book and in some ways the themes of the movie by going through the foreword of the book. And the foreword of the book introduces the personality of Donald Trump. Now, the reason that there's so much focus, that I do so much focus on Trump's personality, is it seems to me that the great division over Trump, a division that, by the way, is at some ways so extreme as to be odd. I mean, there's a division over any presidential candidate, right? So, for example, there was a division over Obama. There was a division over George H.W. Bush. You either like him or you don't like him. So it's not anomalous or odd that a political candidate running for the presidency has people who like them and people who don't like them. That's not odd. It's the extremism of the reactions that is strange, because the further out people go on the spectrum. One group of people goes, well, I would take a bullet for the guy. Another group of people, well, I'll cheer if someone tries to put a bullet in him. The extremity of that is odd. And I think is, in our lifetime, unique to Trump. No one would say that of other, there might be people who hated Obama, but I don't know anyone who would take a bullet for Obama. And similarly with Reagan, there are people who loved Reagan, there are people who didn't like Reagan. But again, the distance between those two groups of people was not as great as the distance that you find with Trump. In fact, I've made the observation before and make it again, you have to go back to Lincoln to find a similar extremism of people who absolutely loved Lincoln and people who absolutely hated him. And in fact, oddly enough, the same kind of accusations. Lincoln is doing it all for the country. Lincoln is a dictator. He's trying to trample on the Constitution. Some of those echoes are now with us again. But, and here's a key distinction, with Lincoln, the difference, the polarization, if you will, was not over Lincoln. It was over slavery. It was over the issues of the day, the extension of slavery. But with Trump, it is in fact over the man. And Trump is, by any measure, a very extraordinary man. Let's look for a moment at just the second assassination attempt. And I want to point out several aspects of Trump's reaction to now two assassination attempts that I bet you cannot think of any person alive who would react in this way. And I'm focusing really just on what happened after the second assassination attempt. First, Trump is upset that his golf game has been interrupted. He says, I was going to make a putt, I was going to do great. And he's implying that they yanked him off the course. If he comes back, he may not be able to make that putt. He was in the zone. And yet, the reason they dragged him off the course is there was a guy, that's Ruth, this Ukraine fellow, Ukraine enthusiast, if you will, 2 holes, I believe 2 holes down, with an elaborate plot to kill him. So a normal person would be like, "Oh my gosh, thank God you dragged me off the grounds, and I'm delighted to be interrupted in my golf game, but not Trump." Then he goes on social media and he posts 0 for 2. That's another kind of shocker, because that appears to almost taunt would-be assassins. Hey guys, you know what? Better luck next time. Ha ha ha. You're 0 for 2. What kind of a score is that? What kind of an assassin are you? You're like an incompetent assassin. I mean, again, this is something, if I were in that situation, quite honestly, it might cross my mind to do that, but Debbie would absolutely prevent me from doing that without a doubt, even to the point of, like, tying me up to make sure I don't post that on social media. And then on top of that, what is Trump doing? Going back to Butler, Pennsylvania. Again, there's a sort of a badass element to this. I mean, it borders on recklessness. Oh, listen, you tried to get me over here. It would be like if you miss John F. Kennedy and he goes, "Hey, listen, I'm going to do the exact same drive in Dallas again because you missed me the first time. Let's see if you have better luck the next time. I dare ya." This kind of thing is, as I say, it is unique. It is sui generis. It is something that I don't know anyone else who would do. And there may be some people who think that Trump himself is being too lackadaisical, perhaps even a bit careless about all this. But with Trump, I think it's important to get a hold of what it's like to interact with this man. And this is where I'm turning over to the introduction, the foreword, which I just title "A Most Unusual Man." And my opening quotation is from William Jennings Bryan. Destiny is not a matter of chance. It's a matter of choice. It's not a thing to be waited for. It's a thing to be achieved. A very interesting statement, because most people think of destiny the other way. They think destiny is sort of what is already written into the book of life. Destiny is preordained. Destiny is what is going to happen. Destiny is not something that you or I could influence. We may have some margin of choice in the decisions we make in our lives, but destiny is like what's going to happen's going to happen. As some people like to say, it is what it is. But not for people who want to change the swirling current of events. They see destiny as something that you have a hand in. You make, to a degree, not entirely, but to a degree, your own destiny. I begin the book by noting that I've met 4 presidents. Gerald Ford, Reagan, and who are the 4? Nixon. I was about to say George W. Bush, and then I realized I never met Bush, interestingly enough. Bush knew I met Nixon not in college. I met Nixon actually after college when he was living in Saddle River, New Jersey. A bunch of us Dartmouth grads had a breakfast with him, and of course Trump. All right, so I've met 4 presidents and closely studied another 3, and that would, of course, include Reagan. It would include Bush. It would include Obama, and perhaps to some degree Jimmy Carter. I say Donald Trump is the most interesting and unusual of the group of them. Now, right away, people may go, "Wait a minute, Dinesh, I thought, don't you find Reagan interesting and unusual?" I think what I mean to say by this is that Reagan was very similar in private as he was in public. If you had dinner with Reagan, Reagan would tell you some of the same anecdotes that he just gave in a speech the previous week at the National Rifle Association or before the Women's Republican Club. Reagan would cock his head in the same familiar way that we saw him cock his head in public events. He would walk the same way. He would talk the same way. He would be the same way. Trump is not quite like that. Now, I say that some people will agree Trump is unique, but they'll go, "Well, yeah, he's unique because he's such a criminal. He's unique because he's the only guy, Dinesh, who wants to be a dictator." Now, I mean that Trump is unique in the most straightforward way, namely that he is, I think, the most unique and intriguing figure in our time, and maybe, arguably, in the whole landscape of U.S. presidential history. Here's why. For all their differences, and the various US presidents are very different, the others fit a pattern. And Trump doesn't. He breaks the pattern. There's really no one quite like Trump, and I venture to say there never will be. And this is a line I used in Australia during my lecture tour there, and people always chuckled. I said, when God made Donald Trump, he threw away the mold. And what's interesting is that when people chuckle at this, they recognize what I'm saying. And all the way across the world, in the land down under, they recognize enough about Trump to know, yep, that guy is unique. We've never met anybody like him down under, and probably no one else has. Then I give some examples of Trump's uniqueness. I say when Trump and Bill Barr fell out over the issue of fraud in the 2020 election, Bill Barr nevertheless announced he's voting for Trump. Kind of a surprise. And the two of them had been quarreling. And this is how Trump reacts to that, to Bill Barr endorsing him. He goes, wow. Former AG Bill Barr, who let a lot of great people down by not investigating voter fraud in our country, has just endorsed me for president, despite the fact that I called him, quote, weak, slow-moving, lethargic, gutless, and lazy. And then Trump includes in parentheses, New York Post. In other words, the New York Post is quoting this, and he's citing the New York Post. Based on the fact that I greatly appreciate his wholehearted endorsement, I am removing the word lethargic from my statement. Thank you, Bill. MAGA 2024. That is a very odd and unique, and I must say extremely humorous Trump comment. And Trump is like this consistently. He reacts to things and he says things that nobody else would. I'll just give one more example, even though I give 4 or 5 in the book. Trump is at a recent Michigan rally and he says this: all that Kim Jong-un wants to do is buy nuclear weapons and make them. I said to him, just relax, chill, you've got enough. Let's go to a baseball game. We'll go watch the Yankees. Now, this is an interesting comment at so many different levels. What Trump is, first of all, who would communicate with one of the world's notorious despots like this? I mean, any other political leader would be like, they'd be thinking about nuclear deterrence and making significant progress in this, or expressing our concerns about that and blah, blah, blah. Not Trump. His diplomacy is largely personal. He seems to think, hey, listen, you got this hair trigger guy, and he's a little nuts. And the way to get him to back off, the way to get North Korea, the nuclear threat to be mitigated, is to put this guy in a baseball cap. Take him to a game. Let him chill out, as they say, relax a little bit. He's got nuclear weapons. He's got deterrence. He doesn't need to keep adding weapons to his arsenal. In other words, Kim Jong-un, it's not just that you're nuts and you need to be incarcerated. Probably privately, Trump thinks that may be the case. But since you are a leader of a nuclear-tipped country, the best we can do is kind of work on getting you to ease up and recognizing that you don't need to be paranoid. You're not really in danger. And whenever I see these things and these reactions, I say to myself, only Trump. We got a new sponsor for the podcast. It's Here.com. I'd love for you to check them out. If you've been frustrated with hearing loss, Here.com is exactly where you need to go. Did you know that untreated hearing loss can lead to social isolation, depression, even cognitive decline? That's why it's so important to take action early. That's why Here.com comes in. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, a 4.9 rating at Consumer Affairs, and over 1,200 audiologists across the U.S. recommend these devices over any other on the market. Over 500,000 people already love these tiny but powerful hearing aids. They started Here.com with a simple mission: make world-class hearing aids easily accessible for everyone, no matter their lifestyle or their budget. After years of research and development alongside top German engineers, they're proud to unveil their most innovative device yet. It's called Horizon by Here.com. Go to Here.com/Dinesh, get your 45-day no-risk trial plus a free hearing consultation. Again, that's Here.com/Dinesh. FDNY firefighter Daniel Foley assisted in rescue and recovery efforts at Ground Zero. but Daniel couldn't have known that his heroism would cost him his life more than 18 years later. His death, like so many others, resulted from 9/11 related illnesses caused by the toxic dust that formed when the Twin Towers collapsed. Victims and first responders are still suffering and dying from 9/11. Yet, children in this nation are growing up unaware of America's darkest day. The Tunnel to Towers 9/11 Institute is helping educators teach children about 9/11. Tunnel to Towers 9/11 curriculum units have scripted lessons, background for teachers, and activities for students. They're based on first-person accounts and designed to meet many academic standards. The 9/11 Institute offers the Discovering Heroes book series, a speakers bureau, a mobile exhibit with 9/11 artifacts, and memorial scholarships for the children of the Foundation's program recipients. Help our nation keep its promise to never forget. Donate $11 a month to Tunnel to Towers at t2t.org. That's T, the number 2, T.org. Once again, it's t2t.org. I want to talk in this episode about my sort of history with Trump. And really my background in politics, as most of you know, is that of a Reaganite. I worked in my 20s for Reagan and in the Reagan White House. I've been at think tanks most of my life. And it's kind of weird, but most of my colleagues, not even many, but perhaps the majority, are never Trumpers now. They've sort of turned against Trump. They're advocates of anyone against Trump. And I myself was not an early passenger on the Trump train, although I did come on board and defected to his side in 2016 when he became the official Republican nominee. I tell you this because my dealings with Trump are not based on a kind of early infatuation. Trump's the guy, Trump's the right guy. It took me a lot of interaction and reflection and dealings with Trump to come to that conclusion. In other words, there's a difference between a prejudice and a conclusion. A prejudice is an early judgment that you make in the absence of information. A conclusion is a considered judgment you make after you've been exposed to information. Now, I met Trump for the first time, W2, in early November of 2019. This is when he invited my family to the White House. This was after the presidential pardon, which came in May of 2018. This was over the campaign finance violation that you already know about. The story is told elsewhere. You can pick it up in Stealing America. The point is, I'd done my sentence. I had paid off my fine. I did the crazy, not crazy, but the effort to not make me crazy. Psychiatric counseling. I went through all that. But, the left was still able to hang the convicted felon label around me. So I had to figure out how to get that off my neck. And Debbie figured it out. And the answer is, let's get this guy a presidential pardon. Now, I did have one interaction with Trump prior to meeting him, but it was very brief. And that was in 2016. I had made Hillary's America. I was giving a convocation address at Liberty University. And Trump was getting ready to do a debate with Hillary Clinton. I don't remember if it was the first debate or the second debate, but Jerry Falwell, who was then the president of Liberty, said, "Hey, Dinesh, you got any questions for Trump that would drop a sort of a political bomb on Hillary?" And I go, "Yes, actually, I have two." And before I could tell him what they were, he whipped out his phone, calls Donald Trump, gets him on the phone, and then says, "Hey, Mr. Trump, it's Jerry Falwell Jr. Dinesh has something to tell you about your upcoming debate with Hillary." And then he just sticks the phone into my hand. So I'm talking to Trump, never having met the man. And I told him that I have two questions for Trump. I gave him a brief indication of what they are. And he goes, "Oh, yeah, it's great. It's great." He goes, "My people are terrible." It's a very Trump thing to say. "My people are terrible. Dinesh, you know what? Send him to me. Write it up. Send him to me." And I go, "Well, I don't really have a way to reach you, but I do know how to reach Steve Bannon." "Yeah, send him to Bannon. Send him to Bannon." So that is what I did. And And that was the first time I even spoke to Trump. I mean, this is important because what I'm getting at is when Trump did the pardon, he didn't owe me. Some people think you get a pardon, Dinesh, because you're so well connected. He probably owes you all these favors. No, not at all. I was not connected. I didn't. He owed me nothing. And Debbie was really friends with Senator Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz agreed to ask Trump. And interestingly, Trump immediately agreed. This is kind of how it went down. They were in the limousine. Ted Cruz was in the front seat with the driver. Trump was in the back with John Kelly, the chief of staff. And basically, Ted Cruz goes, "Hey, Mr. President, you've pardoned Scooter Libby. You need to pardon Dinesh D'Souza." To which Trump goes, "Done." One word, done. And then he just turns to John Kelly and basically says, "Make it happen," by which he means unleash the kind of bureaucratic procedure to get this done. And this is important because what I want to get at is that no other president would have moved like this. In other words, Trump knew about my case. He, in fact, later would tell me on a phone call that we did together, he's like, "I knew it was BS." He already knew. He goes, "But then I looked at your file and it confirmed what I already knew." And so he came to an immediate decision to go for it. It took 30 days of legal review to play out. And then, of course, I got the fateful phone call from Trump and John Kelly notifying me that I was getting the pardon the next day. And of course, Trump at that time goes, "Oh, well, Dinesh, don't announce it until I tweet about it." Again, a very Trumpian statement, which made us both chuckle pretty heartily. Now, in November of 2019, when Debbie and I met Trump, and I'm sort of telling you this because in some ways it is the background, the prelude to the type of interview I did with Trump for the movie Vindicating Trump. And by the way, there's a full transcript of that interview in the book Vindicating Trump. The book as an author, you get an early copy of the book. So I've got my copy before any copies are sent out. But there's an afterword to the book at the end of the book, and it's the transcript of the Trump interview. So my conversation with Trump was about 40 to 45 minutes. We have about 20 minutes or so, about half of that in the film. Well, the film's 90 minutes. You can't really do a 45-minute interview. Otherwise, it would be it would be the majority of the entire film. So we use a good bit of the interview, but not all of it. But a larger portion, slightly edited for clarity. Conversations are sometimes, they always need a little bit of pruning and a little bit of grammatical adjustment, any conversation, to be readable. So it is at the end of the book for you to digest for yourself. But my point is that we saw up close. We had pretty much our whole family there, and we had quite a bit of time with Trump. We thought we were going to get like 10 minutes of just a few exchanges and get to sort of know each other and thank him for the pardon. And then, the good old, "I got to go now." But we actually were able to have a sit-down conversation. And at a critical point in that conversation, Debbie had asked Trump, basically, how do you take it? Like, how do you do it? You are battered on every platform, every minute of every day. A normal person just would not be able to endure this. But you evidently do. So does it get to you? That was the question. And quite honestly, Debbie and I sort of expected Trump to be dismissive, to be like, "Well, this is fun. These people are nuts. I give in as good measure as they dole it out, and they're crazy. So it doesn't get to me. I enjoy it." But interestingly, he didn't say that. He was like, He took in the question and he's like, I got to admit at the end of the day, it does get to me. He said, "Why? Because I don't really have to do this, but I'm trying on behalf of the country, and we do have some notable successes. Recently, al-Baghdadi, these big-name terrorists that Trump had gotten, later Soleimani, out of the picture, and he's like, I don't even get credit for that. They want to bash me for doing that." And so, interestingly, Debbie and I kind of looked at each other and we thought, well, this is interesting because here is a personal side of Trump, a sense of not vulnerability, but just kind of normal humanity. It's a normal human reaction, which is that when someone is getting this kind of torrent of abuse and for nothing. In fact, getting a torrent of abuse not for failing to do things, but for doing them well, even for accomplishments. It's a little hard to take. And that's all that Trump was saying. But we both said, Trump is reluctant to display or expose that kind of vulnerability in the public sphere. He has maybe this kind of masculine resistance to talking about feelings or letting that side of him be shown, even though Debbie and I both thought that the more people see that side, a window into that private Trump, they will like him more. They will be more likely to vote for him. They will be disarmed against the attacks that are coming from the left. And so that gave me the idea in the interview with Trump for Vindicating Trump to try to, in a very natural way, not by getting Trump to say things that he's unwilling to say, but to get Trump to sit back, digest a question, let you see the working of his mind as he processes the information, that let you see how he reacts to questions that he doesn't always get. Questions a little different from the run-of-the-mill that is put to Trump. Like, how do you expect to beat Kamala? What do you think about the polls? This sort of thing is Trump's daily boilerplate. He gets hit with this all the time. And to some degree, when that happens, this is true of me, of Trump, of anyone, is you develop a certain type of shtick. You develop a certain type of programmed and kind of normal response, but it becomes familiar to people because they've heard it here, they've heard it there. And I was determined in the conversation with Trump not to do that, but to pose questions a little different, questions more like this, questions that would say something like, well, Lincoln in his Lyceum speech talked about a type of threat to America that would involve mass lawlessness exploited by a dictatorial figure like a Caesar or a Napoleon or an Alexander. Well, the left goes, yeah, of course, that's Trump. That's this guy right here. What do you think about Lincoln's prophecy about America? Do you think that the dictatorial threat is real? And what do you think about people who say it's coming from you? And then I sit back and let Trump go for it. Let Trump engage. Let him think about it. Let him respond. And his response is unfailingly interesting. Here's another brief example. I say to Trump, and a little bit of this is in the trailer, so you've probably already seen a glimpse of it. I say to Trump, they say you did an insurrection, that you called for an insurrection. As far as I can see, you didn't. You didn't tell people to go in the Capitol. You didn't tell people to stop the count. You didn't tell people to take over the place. None of it. So you didn't call for an insurrection. But, and it's a big but, guess what? You could have. And had you called for an insurrection on January 6th, there would have been one. And there would have been a real insurrection, not this walking inside the ropes insurrection, this bogus insurrection that the left, this pretend insurrection that the left needed to call an insurrection so they could later try to get you thrown off the ballot in Colorado and Maine on the grounds that this guy did an insurrection. All of that was fake. But the point is there could have been a real insurrection had you called for one. And I said, and there would be if you called for one now. And what do you think about having that kind of power? My point, of course, being that it's pretty unique. Quite frankly, I don't know anybody in America today who would have that kind of power. If Joe Biden called for an insurrection, people would laugh. If any other Republican called for an insurrection, nobody would show up. So Trump has that kind of singular authority and power. And having him, again, process that, either agree or disagree with it, respond to it, say whether he thinks he has that kind of power and to what use he would put it. All of this is fascinating to experience in the presence of Trump himself. Before you order from Balance of Nature, listen to the information I'm going to give you now. If you go to balanceofnature.com to buy this, which is their popular fruits and veggie supplements, fruits and veggies in a capsule, a discount offer will pop up. It may say 20 or 25% off your first order. Well, don't click that. Why? Because if you use my promo code, you'll get 35% off your first order plus free shipping. The special code is simply the word America. Use the code and save big. Here's another bonus. Balance of Nature has a risk-free money-back guarantee. So go ahead and find out for yourself what I already know. There's no other product out there like Balance of Nature when it comes to fruit and veggie supplements. Whether you order online or call them direct, you got to use promo code America to get the special offer of 35% off and free shipping. The number to call, 800-246-8751. Again, it's 800-246-8751, or you can go to balanceofnature.com. When you use discount code America, you'll get 35% off and free shipping. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance? Have you had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollars? Introducing Share Right. It's healthcare done the right way. At Share Right, you're not just a number, you're part of a caring community. And forget about paying excessive premiums. With Share Right, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. Think about what you could do with all those savings. But it's more than just savings. Share Right ensures you have access to the care you deserve precisely when you need it, from routine checkups to unexpected emergencies. With Share Right, your healthcare is their top priority. Empower yourself today by taking control of your healthcare costs. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh to learn more. See how much you can save. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh. That's shareright.org/Dinesh for healthcare done the right way. I am in this special episode of the podcast giving just short snapshots or glimpses into personal interactions with Trump. And I realize I'm leapfrogging through the chapter, not really covering it thoroughly or systematically. Well, I can't do that in a single podcast, nor do I really intend to, because I want you to get the book. The book, by the way, is Vindicating Trump. Here it is. Looks great. And is a powerful weapon for 2024. So get your copy. Good thing also, an easy thing to be able to share. I've talked about my original exposure to Trump, the pardon from Trump, the first meeting with Trump, and now I want to jump ahead to 2022 and 2,000 Mules. Now, Trump saw that movie twice, and it's interesting, his reaction on the two occasions was quite different. The first time, we showed it to him in one of the smaller rooms at Mar-a-Lago, and my family was there. Some of the members of our film team were there. Catherine Engelbrecht and Greg Phillips from True the Vote were there. And we all watched the film, and Trump sat through the film the first time pretty motionless. And that's a little out of character for him, but I think he was just taking in all the information. And afterward, I just remember him leaning over and he goes, "It's a brilliant work. It's going to be your biggest success ever." And I chuckled a little bit because that's very Trumpian. He thinks in terms of ratings and success. He thinks in terms of numbers and the size of the crowd. And he likes this kind of external validation for his projects. He's different in that way. Many of us think, we like things to be successful. I mean, I have had a lot of success in my life. I've been very fortunate not only to have had successful books and movies, but very often to have had success very early on. My first book was a big success. My first movie was a big success. Paved the way, of course, to be able to do more books and more movies. But of course, when you do a bunch, I mean, I've now done, 17 or 18 books. Debbie actually counts 20. And this is my 8th documentary film. And I've realized that, you win some and you lose some. And what I mean by that is I've had books come out and then there's a massive news story that blows me off the front page and cancels all my interviews, and the book is really good, but the book doesn't do as well. Other books, I don't expect them to do quite as well. They're number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list, and I've done that again and again and again and again and again. So the point being that most of us, when we try to do creative work, we have a certain inward sense that I've done a good job. I've made a good product. I've written a really good book. I've made a really good film. And now I'm kind of offering it up to the public. And of course, I hope it does well. And I'm going to work really hard for it to do well. But again, some of them will do better than others. Some will be huge hits. Some of them will be pretty good. And some of them will not do so well. And it could be other factors that lead to that. But you can always have the consolation, or at least the inward gratification of saying, hey, I did a really good job. In other words, the market may not have recognized this book or this film, but I know it's a really good film. And by the way, there are poets who have thought like that, and moralists think like that all the time. Hey, listen, I know that I'm doing the right thing. The world may not recognize it. They may see me as somebody who is a fanatic or mindlessly devoted to this. But I know that I am following the true path, or in some cases, my true path. But for Trump, external validation is very important. Interestingly, Trump made a suggestion for shortening the last part of 2,000 Mules. We had a section at the end of the movie that discussed how to fix the problem. It got into the weeds in terms of fixing election fraud. But what we noticed, and Trump noticed watching the film for the first time, is that it seemed to lose its kind of forward momentum. It's almost like if you are, watching a great movie like, let's take The Shawshank Redemption, for example, and you have a panel discussion at the end about how do you fix the problems at Shawshank? How do you reform? What kind of penal reform would work so that these kinds of things don't happen again? Well, it would actually ruin the movie, because the movie is a story. And the story ends with an escape. And that's the job of a movie, is to tell that story. Let other people come together, people who are into penal reform and have the bureaucratic organization to pull. Let them do that. And that's really what Trump was saying to us, is not that our recommendations were bad. He was kind of saying they don't belong in a movie. And it hit me. And this is kind of a rarity where us, even a small team of us, Debbie and me and my partner and friend Bruce Cooley, we look at each other and we're like, he's right. The movie does seem to lose momentum toward the end, and for this exact reason. And so, as it turned out, we pulled that section out. And again, it wasn't because, Trump instructed us to do it. It was that we realized that he was on the money. He was right. Then Trump comes to the premiere at Mar-a-Lago. We have a huge crowd, 800 people, thereabouts. And Trump watches the movie again. We didn't think he would. We thought he was going to pretty much say a few words, which he had agreed to do, and take off. But he sits down and watches the movie a second time. But this time, very interestingly, he comments about the technicalities of the movie. And that's when I realized that this guy is really something very significant about Trump. He is interested in the making of culture. He is interested in the practicality of how you do things. And I realize this is actually quite unusual for people who are in the intellectual class, or even people who are in the policy class. They're interested in ideas, and they're interested in proposals, and then they do a bureaucratic handoff. Here you go, Department of Health and Human Services, you carry it out. Here you go. But Trump is not a here you go. Trump is I will figure out how to get this done. And he's been that way. Well, think about his profession. He's a builder for most of his life, and building is all about putting a building where previously there was only a piece of ground. You're actually getting it done. Even now, when Trump goes to his golf courses, he'll walk around, hey, I think we should take that tree down. Hey, you're blocking this guy's view of the golf course when they're sitting in the restaurant. That's not good. So Trump is constantly aware of his surroundings, and he's also aware of what a movie must go through to become a movie. In other words, he knows it's not just a matter you film it. There's music involved. And so he'll ask questions like, well, who does the music? Do you buy that music, or do you compose it? Does someone compose it for you? That kind of thing. Very much someone who, and I realize this guy's been on The Apprentice. He has been on the side that makes television products and makes cultural products. And that's part of what made Trump distinctive when he entered the political arena, is he had been a massive cultural celebrity. In fact, even bigger than Reagan. Reagan was a known movie actor, but he wasn't of the scale of, say, John Wayne or Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart, any of those guys. They were known as like the leading man. And Reagan was kind of known as sort of the other guy, or the second character in the movie. Now, so that was the experience of 2,000 Mules, and it showed me Trump in his cultural dimension, and also the way that Trump kind of reacts to things. He jumped on that film because it vindicated him in a different way. It vindicated him in his claim that the 2020 election had been stolen, and Trump had been saying that, and many people agreed with him, but they were hard-pressed to put their finger on exactly how. And 2000 Mules in no way claimed to show the full picture of the 2020 election. It selected sort of one area of documentable, provable, see it for yourself type of election fraud. And I think Trump loved that. He loved being proven right about it. But he loved being proven right about it, not just because, hey, I'm right, but because it pointed to a big problem that needed to and still needs to be fixed. And Trump realized that if that problem was not attended to, very bad days are ahead of us. Because even for the people after 2000 Mules would say, well, Dinesh, I don't think we should be worrying about what happened in 2020. We should be focusing on 2024 and beyond. Don't look in the rearview mirror. But my point, and I think it was also Trump's point, is that the way to make sure it doesn't happen again is to look in the rearview mirror. We need to look at what actually happened. Don't believe the fog and the smoke and mirrors, the most secure election in U.S. history. No, it's probably the least secure election in U.S. history. And notice that that movie blew that claim out of the water. Today, you will not hear people, very rare to hear someone say, it was the most secure election in U.S. history. I think that has been, as they say now, debunked. And Trump was glad to see it debunked, and that was a meaningful interaction for me with Trump. Once again, My Pillow has been canceled by another box store. So they are passing the incredible offer exclusively to my viewers and listeners. The standard My Pillow retails for $49.98, but for a limited time, you can have one for only $14.98. Wow. Don't miss out on this amazing deal while supplies last. Order now using promo code Dinesh, or you can call 800-876-0227. Again, it's 800-876-0227. That's not all. There are good deals all around. You can get a My Pillow 4-piece towel set for just $25, a brand new mattress topper as low as $69.98, the famous My Pillow bed sheets as low as $25, and a whole lot more. To get the discounts on all the My Pillow products, including the standard size My Pillow, just $14.98, limited to 10 per order. Go to mypillow.com, but don't forget to use the promo code. It's DINESH, Dinesh. I'm drawing on my new book, Vindicating Trump. This is the foreword, the opening section of the book, to talk about personal interactions with Trump. And I'll start with an interaction that had to do with getting the Trump conversation or interview for the movie. I texted Trump basically saying I want to do a movie that is called Vindicating Trump, a sort of definitive case for Trump. And I said, but I need to have you in the movie. And would you consent to a fairly detailed sit-down conversation that will become the centerpiece of the film? And he replies in very Trumpian typographical arts, by which I mean all caps, "It would be my great honor!" exclamation point. So he agreed to do it. And as it turned out, agreeing to do it is not the same as scheduling it. We were scheduled to interview Trump quite early on, and it was difficult to pin down because not just the campaign, but all the legal issues. Remember, Trump was going to be sentenced in September in the Alvin Bragg New York case, so he might have been facing incarceration. It was crazy to try to get something on the schedule. And we were a little bit frustrated when it kept getting postponed, but as it turns out, it got postponed to the perfect time, which is after the assassination attempt, after the Republican National Convention. So all of that is in the film, and it's also in the book, a conversation so topical that it looks like it was conducted like the day before yesterday. And so I'm quite happy with the way all of that played out. But my other interaction with Trump precedes all that, and in fact goes back to about the turn of the year, by which I mean the end of 2023 and the beginning of 2024, when my son-in-law, Brandon Gill, Brandon married my daughter, Danielle, and Brandon decided at the very mature age of 30, Was Brandon even 30 at the time? He was 29 at the time. I think he's now 30. Decided to run for Congress. And I think Brandon was planning to run. He always wanted to run, but he was going to run later, maybe in 8 years. And he was building a business in the meantime. But the sitting Congressman, Michael Burgess, decided, this is in the northern suburbs of Dallas, I'm not going to run, creates an open seat. And it is widely known that that is the best time to run, because that gives you, even though it's not easy, the best chance to win. Now, even though it may be the best chance to win, it is a long shot, because lots of candidates will jump in the race. And sure enough, here there were 11 candidates. There was the mayor of a nearby town called Southlake. There was the chief of staff of a congressman in the race. There was the son of the former congressman who had tried to run once before but had name recognition because his dad used to be the congressman. There were other candidates. Everybody running has something going for them, some distinction and some backing. And my son-in-law was sort of an unknown and very young, and as Debbie, who has worked on a bunch of campaigns, told me even then at the time, it's really hard to be elected when you haven't been a state senator, or you haven't been a state rep, or you haven't been city council. You haven't kind of proven your way. You haven't demonstrated to the party that you have kind of paid your dues within the party structure. All of that. So in any event, Brandon is a very smart guy, very hardworking. He had assembled a group of sort of devoted loyalists who were agreed to be grassroots supporters of his, but that is far from winning an election or even a primary, because you need a lot more. You need money, you need organization, you need advertising, you need endorsements. And what better endorsement in the Republican primary than Trump? So I agreed to ask Trump to do it. Of course, the other candidates were all trying to get Trump's endorsement as well. And Trump had met Brandon, although briefly. He knew my daughter Danielle, who was the youngest board member of Women for Trump. So I talked to Trump about it, and of course Trump was extremely smart. Who else is in the race, Dinesh? And let's do a quick rundown on each of the candidates. And there was one of the other candidates that Trump knew about, and he goes, "What's the deal with that guy?" And I go, "Well, I'll send you an article from the Dallas Morning News. This guy refuses to say that the 2020 election was stolen. In fact, he thinks that the election was legit." And I texted that to Trump, and I think that kind of did it, because Trump was like, "Okay, well, this guy's done. I'm not endorsing him." And but even after he endorsed Brandon, which was of course a great boon to Brandon's campaign, Trump would call from time to time, or he would text from time to time, basically going, "Is our man going to win?" This comes back to Trump's real obsession, is not too strong a word, with winning. Trump keeps score of his endorsements, and he, in fact, likes to tell you, "Hey, listen, I endorsed, 100 guys," or at least he's calculating a percentage. 97% of them were all won. There was, "I just lost in this one case or in these two cases." And so Trump's question to me was, "Is our guy going to win?" And I would always reply with one word: absolutely. And my point being to Trump that, listen, you do the endorsement, and Brandon and we as a family, we will do all the rest. And sure enough, all the rest was necessary to do, because despite the fact that you had 11 candidates in the race, and it's virtually impossible in that field to get 50%. Brandon ultimately was able to raise quite a bit of money. He was able to get a lot of other endorsements. Ted Cruz endorsed him. I think Dan Patrick, the lieutenant governor of Texas, endorsed him. He had a bunch of congressmen endorsing him. So he was the favorite. But being the favorite is one thing. Typically, if you're the favorite in an 11-man race out of 100%, you're going to get about 30. The next guy may get 20. The problem in Texas is if you don't get 50%, there's a runoff. The top two have to sort of go at it again. There's a second election, and typically, since that's not an election day per se, it comes out to which side can get out the vote. So Brandon was trying really hard to get to 50% without a runoff. And he did. He got 58% in the first round. He basically, to quote a local reporter, he wiped the floor in Texas 26. and the second guy got something like 14%. So anyway, Trump, my point is, was elated. He was delighted because not only had Brandon beaten the whole field put together, he got more than all the other candidates combined, but one of the Never Trump or anti-Trump PACs out of Washington, D.C. had launched a massive $2 million attack campaign against Brandon. This PAC was so determined to dislodge Brandon's campaign that they didn't even endorse one of the other candidates. It was like, vote for any of the others, but not this guy. And they, in a way, the attack on Brandon mirrored the attack on Trump in the viciousness of it, the sheer kind of inventiveness of it, which is to say the fakery of it. Brandon was a New York tycoon, which he was not. He was a Chinese, a spy. No, he worked for the Nomura Bank, which is an international bank that does business, as most banks do, all over the world. That he advocated to fund the police. Nothing could be further from the truth. The basis of that was that actually Brandon was an executive producer on Police State. So since Police State criticized the FBI and the FBI misuse and abuse of law, Brandon was portrayed as being somehow against the police. In any event, none of it worked, and Brandon came out successful. He, of course, is now in a campaign against a Democrat. He has to beat the Democrat, but it's a red pro-Trump district. In fact, I think at last count, Brandon was something like 15 points ahead of the polls. Ahead in the polls. He's leading the Democrat by the same margin that Trump is leading Kamala Harris in Texas 26, the northern suburbs of Dallas. And the funny thing was, Trump actually called to congratulate Brandon. Debbie and I happened to be visiting those guys in Texas. And after Trump talks briefly to Brandon and Danielle, he goes, "Give me the master." And this was hilarious. This is actually a reference to me. Of course, it's just comical. He was calling me the master. And of course, Danielle and Brandon were howling with amusement. He calls you the master. And then they hand me the phone. And Trump, of course, expresses his delight that Brandon pulled it off. And he goes on to point out that with all his endorsements, he's got an amazing record, except he's annoyed that in Texas, the Speaker of the House, this is not for Congress, it's not for the Senate, this is for the races within the state of Texas. Dade Phelan, who was the Speaker of the Texas House, was famously anti-Ken Paxton. He had led the impeachment effort against Paxton. He was also not a Trump enthusiast. So Trump was kind of eager to get him out of there. But Dade Phelan, with a lot of money, was able to hang in there by a hair. And Trump was annoyed because it wasn't just that Phelan had hung in there. It was that he was ruining Trump's record. Trump was 99% success rate, and now it was down to 97. So this is Trump. He's very much a man who likes to keep score. And in some ways, I can think back to what I said at the very beginning, which is the 0 for 2. That was keeping score in a way as well. So you've got this guy, Trump, and I think that if people got to see him in the round, they would recognize that this guy is far from being the bad guy that the left portrays. Is actually a really nice guy. He's not even egotistical in private. He is easygoing. He's relaxed. He's funny. He's even self-deprecating. And here's the point about, even for people who think that Trump can be kind of a bully, I just want to kind of leave you with this thought about him. Have you ever seen Trump bully someone who's beneath him? Never. He'll never bully a doorman. He'll never bully a waiter. He'll never bully some guy on the street. He is an 800-pound gorilla who will take on other 800-pound gorillas. So he will strike back at ABC News. He'll strike back at Kamala Harris. He'll strike back at Merrick Garland. But this is a guy who does not demean people who are under him. In fact, on the contrary, Debbie and I have noticed when you talk to people who work for Trump, even in the very humblest capacity, they're to a man or to a woman, enthusiastic about Trump. They love the guy. Why? Not just because he's generous. He'll hand out $100 bills at Christmas, or he'll hand out as he's walking through, he'll help them out. It isn't just that. It's that he recognizes them. Hey, Pete, how's it going? How's your kid doing? Your wife was in surgery, wasn't she? Is she recovered? This level of interest in people, which is not normal. Most politicians profess it. Oh yeah, I care about people. You know, who's the guy in Harlingen? You know, Vicente con la gente, for the people. You know, it's a pose. Debbie goes, Vicente cons la gente. He cons the people. But my point is that their professions of dedication to the people are rhetorical, overblown, unbelievable, and untrue. But with Trump, he's the real deal.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.